Okay, so this time we are talking about a demo. The demo is an extension on the previous one that I've created where I'm just trying to learn Unity um, and do a comparison at a later time for Unity versus Unreal, for example. So if we have a look at the screen, I'm going to do a little demo. We can see initialization, we can see a pointer, we have some objects attached to it. We have what's called a sphere collider that I've added. We have a line renderer, and then we have a pointer. Pointer script is to use to draw a line from there to Earth. The sphere collider is to detect collision from this object and whatever we're pointing at. A line renderer is the pink object that you see there. And then if we look at Earth itself has got a script attached to it, rotation of Earth script, and it's got a sphere collider. This is so we can interact with it. We have a main camera. This main camera is focused on trying to look at the raycasting aspect, and this is so we can do some level of picking, the picking so we can interact with it. A directional light, which is always kind of following it. There's no scripts. And then we have Starfield. And this Starfield, we've got a couple of different scripts. One is around the creation of a star, and the other one is adding a property. So when I tick this box when I'm playing, we'll see in a second what it does. So if I take away the maximization, we have the ability to change things in the property inspector, which we see here. We have stars, so if I click this, then what it's doing in the background is it's generating 10,000 items. So they're all children of Starfield, for example. And we can see down here I have diagnostic messages. So if I put my mouse over some objects, I am just changing the material color. And also I've got a collider on there, so when I click on something, then I am effectively hiding it. And why this is important is that it shows I would be able to interact with objects. Now the interesting thing is that when I'm interacting with something, we have the ability to change properties on the inspector, which is great. And you can see Starfield has a number of children items. So if I take away the video, the running the demo, and we have a look at the code itself, we have a number of items here. So generate stars, this is the property. We're able to put tooltips, etc. associated with this. So it just takes the name of it. If it discovers two words, it will separate the words from the variable, so we can create headers, and we can also have two tooltips to mouse over them. We have this update method, where if the stars is true, then we're generating, then we're finding the star field, and then I am calling another script. This is just an example. In the real world, I wouldn't be... This is give an example how I can interact with other objects and calling our methods as needed, which would be useful when it's really in a central place. So in this case, it's not in a central place, and I am calling the star field even though I'm currently in the star field. So if I click star field, we have two scripts attached, so I don't have to go and find it. I could just call create stars directly because I'm within the object. I'm within that script. so I would be able to run it straight away anyway. But really I would have just one script. Another thing I would change, we have initialization where it doesn't have a component, but I was trying out different ideas associated with how I can interact with objects. Here's a good example. On the pointer, I have 2 and a line renderer, and this is set to null, nothing. So what this means is in Unity World, if I actually set these to real objects right now, then that means when I do any kind of garbage collection that they will not be lost. They will always stay in memory because they're always referenced. Whereas if I do it in code and set it to null, then garbage collection can normally take place. You'll notice on here that I have materials change back. These are diagnostic messages when running in the editor itself. So if I have a look at the helpers, I was doing some proof of concepts around getting particular objects and then creating a vector. So in this case I am moving the pointer to always be in front of the camera, so that when I'm drawing a line we can see where it's pointing. We can always find out where Earth is. This method here is very interesting. When I run the project itself, this is the first thing that's run. So this is kind of like a main method in C++ and C, where the idea is that we are trying to set up all the objects, for example, and then all the static constructors, etc. This input manager, the idea behind this is we would just be able to use enumerations, rotate left, rotate right, and whether it would be a keyboard or whether it would be a mouse, whether it would be whatever the case, we would have one central place to change something. And the good thing about this is that when we switch between, let's say, Oculus devices, Oculus hands, or which is in experimental mode, or the controllers themselves, then the idea is that it would be very easy to change. One of the things I have changed since the last demo is that I have the line renderer, and using a default shader you can make your own shaders. We can see shader, 2 different shaders here, and then we've got a start and an end color, and then I am drawing to it. Now one of the very interesting things, if we have a look at this scenario where I turn on the drawing, let me just change that. What was happening previously on the previous demo was this line here was jumping over here. Why? It's because of the order of execution of each one of the scripts. So if I look at the project settings, I've put pointer script to be evaluated before the other scripts. So if it's not listed in this directory of things, then it will fire in whatever order it likes, which is a problem when you're trying to do any kind of drawing whatsoever, because you won't get the effect that you wanted. So my solution to this is, as you can see in the dialog, I have put them in a particular order, but when that amount of scripts get quite large, then that will be a problem in the future. So this is okay for simple solutions, but if you've got thousands of different types of objects, then it would end up a problem on management side. So it's probably better to do it in code overall, to say how something is, when is it evaluated, to get an understanding of when you want one piece of code to fire over another. Now we have different shaders, and I haven't learned how to use these yet, but we have a shader, we have a name, and we have a name here. We have certain properties, color, main texture, what type of glossiness and metallic. Then we have the shader itself, if you've got a decent enough 3D card that goes with it. And what this does is say how to render shaders either on a vertex or a face value. And then you will have another shader or a fallback, and it says if it doesn't have that ability to do this work, then fall back to another standard way. So you'll have different experiences depending on the ability of your graphics card. I was trying to apply this shader. I haven't had any luck so far to try and create an outline of an object, but instead I've just gone for the easy solution right now, which is switching the material. When I put my mouse over, which is the Raycast, it switches to one material. When I move my mouse back, it switches it back, and you can see on the bottom left here, when I put my mouse over, the information debugging window changes. Let's see how that's done. So if I am looking at Raycaster, I've got two types here. Again, these are mono behavior, and it's execute always. So what that means is that it's more of a slight different problem on the editor side, because I need to have controls that do not conflict with the editor itself, and that would be the same thing for Unreal. But in this case, where I've got a few different options where I can say where I want this to react. Do I want to have it react in the editor itself? Do I want to have it reacting in the game itself? Or do I want it in both? So one of the things I wanted to do is I am highlighting and changing back. So when I put the mouse over, as mentioned, you can see it changing. It says on the bottom left, materials changed and changed back. Now, on this part here from itself, you can see you have a raycast from the camera that we're looking from to a point in space where the mouse pointer is, and this position would have to be translated into possibly a 3D space with the VR headset. So that might have to change. It's a vector position, so we'd have to find out a similar sort of thing. Hits an object. I've added colliders on, mostly spheres because they're the cheapest in reality, or boxes are cheapest. But I've added a sphere on because we're working with spheres. And then I've got the game object, and then in this example I've got red. But the reality is that later on we could probably change that from being less hard-coded to something that is, let's say, outline, where we have GPU instancing, we set a color, and we pick a certain... I was trying to experiment, trying to get the glow around the Earth, instead of having it changing material to change red, to make a glow around it instead. No luck yet, but maybe soon when I learn a bit more. So you can see here that if we are hitting, we're saving the old setting, and then we say hit, highlight, hit. So we don't want the case where we're checking everything twice. If something hasn't changed, we shouldn't be coming in here. So this is where I was starting to do the experimentation to change it a slightly different red, if it exists. But at the moment, this one works. I've got the game object that I'm colliding with, and then just changing its color when I mouse over. Now if we go back in here, if we've hit something, If we haven't hit something, then we're changing it back to whatever material that we've saved. So I've got to change that to whatever we've saved, because we don't want to change it to white when it's something totally different. Now, GPU instancing is a way of using a shader on lots of different objects, so that's something that's essential. I don't know whether my graphics card can at this time do that, so I need to experiment the loading and using of it. This colliding check, when I say input get mouse button down, I am casting a ray, and if it hits, I'm making that object disappear. Set active false. So what that means is that when I click that, and it's because I have this collider on, that's why it disappears. Another interesting thing is, as part of my investigation so far, if I have a look at the stars, you can see Earth is grayed out at this time, and I could tick it back on. If I click on Starfield itself, I have this stars button. Now I generate 10,000 stars, but this level of detail, if we're debugging, I may want to work on the interactivity and not generate all this different levels of detail straight away. I may want them on demand, because I may not be working on them. So when I'm debugging, starting and running it all the time, I want to make sure that I'm not waiting for things. So here I am clicking on objects, making them disappear. You can see them changing color for red, so you can see me interacting with them. So if I go back to the code, we have, that's pretty much the end of the demo. Thank you.